Welcome to the Sharpe Way. Yes, it is an amazing, I think, is it Wednesday night now? I've forgotten what night it is. I think it's Wednesday night. We are rocking and rolling again here, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. Thank you so much for paying attention and showing up. You know what I'm going to ask you, because I ask you every single time. I ask you to like, comment, and share and get our name out there. How in the world are people going to know that we're doing all these cool things if you don't do your part? Like, comment, share, make those algorithms pop up and down like they're supposed to pop up. See what a good tech guy I am. So yes, whatever that the algorithm, the thingies, all good. And of course, as always, like me on Twitter. It does matter, right? Like me on Facebook. And of course, head over to YouTube, subscribe, click, make sure that we're rocking and rolling. It's very important that you do that so that people know what we're doing. Tonight, I have a very super special guest. Someone I'm very lucky that I got. I chased her for a bit. She was pretty good. She wasn't that tough to get, but she did make it a little bit tough for me. I have someone who is a part of a movement, the MST movement, which we'll talk about in a second. Someone who's been in the Marine Corps just like I have, but had a very different experience that I had. We're going to talk about that today also. The one, the only, Janelle Mendez. How are you?
Hi, I'm so happy I'm here, and thank you for having me.
Of course, absolutely. Now, I guess what I want to ask is, you joined the Marine Corps young, just like I did. I was 17 when I joined the Marine Corps.
Yeah, me too.
And when I joined the Marine Corps, I kind of did it because I wanted to escape, right? That was really why I did it. My family couldn't afford college. My father died when I was a kid, me and my mom. So I decided Marine Corps, that's my way out. And I took off and headed on down to South Carolina boot camp. You also joined young.
Yeah, and it was a lot of the same reasons that you did. Part of it was, both of my parents are from Puerto Rico, and they both, are first generation, like American, and they both spoke Spanish before English. So we obviously went through a lot of hardships, and obviously, the education system, the language barriers, all of those obstacles created struggles for my family. And even though I grew up in Westchester County, which is a very affluent area in the United States, my family was like the furthest thing from that. So when it came down to going to school, I skipped 11th grade and there was no funds for me to go to college. So it was at that point where I was like, how do I get a college degree? How do I start my life? How do I do all of these things so I can advance and be productive with my life? And also my family life just wasn't healthy. So it was a way for me to like escape, go into an environment where I could become independent and, move forward and be able to be successful. And that was really my motivation.
So when you join, you're 17, and most people don't know this, but you can join the military at 17. You just can't be sent into a combat zone until you're 18. Most people don't know that.
I enlisted at 16.
Yep.
And my parents had to sign emancipation documents. So like my senior year, majority of my senior year, because I skipped 11th grade, I was 16. So we, my family and I, both of my parents, even though they were divorced, had to sign emancipation documents for me to even engage with the Marine Corps.
Right, sure, of course.
Yeah, so like a lot of people don't know that, but I did turn 17 before I went to boot camp, and you're absolutely right. You can go into the military, but not combat.
Right. So at this point, you survive boot camp, you're feeling motivated, you head over to your schools. You said you were in nuclear, biological, and chemical.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did.
So this is when things got bad for you.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was in MOS school, that was where I started going through sexual violence and hazing. And you learn about it in boot camp, and they tell you you're not supposed to go through that. And there's ways that you can report to your chain of command and they'll deal with it. But like my experience was nothing like that.
I'll tell you what's surprising to me. I'm surprising how bad it still is.
Oh my gosh.
I went in the Marine Corps in the 80s, right? In the 80s, and I went to the ground side. If you see my picture behind me, I was in artillery.
Yeah.
So I was infantry, artillery, tanks. I was on the ground side of the Marine Corps. There were no women, none. It was only men in the 80s. There was no women at all. And my language was so misogynistic. I mean, it was horrible. If I look back at the way I spoke, I'm almost embarrassed on how bad my every insult was some way of calling someone feminine or gay. Every insult was some way of calling someone feminine or gay. That was the insult, no matter what. That's what it was. Trying to motivate people. It was calling them some form of feminine or gay. That was everything. And then all of a sudden, in my second enlistment, I re-enlisted, and I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps. In my second term, I went to the Air Wing, and there were women there. And when I went to schools, I was training reservists in schools. I had to change my language overnight. I had to go through training. When you talked about it, I went through training. They were like, okay, ground side guy, you're going to schools. We need to talk. It's not going to work. And it was a serious mindset change. And I bring this up because my intent wasn't negative, right? That wasn't my intent.
It was culture.
Yes, it was my culture. The impact was terrible, but it wasn't my intent. And I found myself having to make changes. And the reason why I was surprised to hear your story is I did make those changes. And by the time I got to become a civilian in the early 90s, I was a civilian, I could function in a society that had both men and women in it without having a problem. I was able to make the adjustment. So my assumption was, obviously wrongly, that by the time you go in the 2000s, we're good, right? If I could do it, Mr. Groundside, if I could make the transition, so could the rest of the Marine Corps.
Right.
I guess I was wrong on that one. So tell me a little bit about, that's why I was so surprised to hear your story, because your story isn't even things like using bad language. It's way worse than that. So if you feel comfortable, tell a little bit about your story.
Of course. When I enlisted and I went into MOS school, which is military occupational specialty, I went through a series of sexual violence. And it was everything from going through hazing, right? Like getting starved, sleep deprived over the course of 3 days, getting physically assaulted, getting molested, getting raped while I was in the military. Like it was a series of sexual violence, and that is known as military sexual trauma, or what the community will call MST.
MST.
Right? Yeah, in the veteran community, that it's called MST, right? Like military sexual trauma, and the VA also has the diagnosis from PTSD due to MST, right? Is what that's called.
And so for anyone that, when you told that story, that surprised me is I actually, and I guess because I'm old school Marine Corps, I actually didn't mind the hazing concept. I didn't. I know it's bad. I'm just telling you honestly from where my head was. What bothered me was the sexual aspect of it, because they would have never done that to a male.
Right. Well,
right? The not sleeping. Yeah, they do it to males too, right?
Yeah.
But the stuff they did to you with undressing, touching, that's not going to happen to a male. And that, when I heard this, really bothered me.
Well, so actually being in the movement, I've actually learned a lot of men have gone through that, but they won't come out generally publicly and talk about it. I actually think Chad Heck is watching, and he is our first male survivor to really come out with his story. Yeah, and he actually came out recently in our Reflections magazine to talk about his story. And a lot of times that men do go through it, they're getting hazed at a time that they're like obliterated drunk a lot of times, or they got drugged. And what will happen is they'll become the bitch at that point, or they'll become the fag, or like the derogatory misogynistic comments.
Right.
They'll get victimized generally at that point, where like the first time I went through sexual violence, it was because a nude photo came out that I sent my boyfriend on a Motorola phone, and I never ever heard anything going viral. Like the internet back then was not like this, and everybody started sending this photo to each other because someone stole his phone and they didn't have passwords back then.
Got it.
And this guy sent it to like everybody in Motor T. And then all of a sudden it spread like wildfire. And I was
Motor T, for you non people, means motor transportation. It's where the trucks are.
Yeah. And
Yes.
I came out of MOS school and I was just like, all these guys are coming up to me. They're like, oh, I got your nude photo on my phone. And I'm like, what? They're like, Mendez. And I'm like, how did this happen?
Wow.
Like I was so confused because I had never experienced anything like that. And I didn't, the internet wasn't like it was. So it's not something I would have ever thought about.
But you brought up some stuff that really, really drove me crazy. You were talking about the idea that after it happened, after you were physically abused, right? After that happened, you basically just bailed and went UA. And for those of you who don't know, UA is unauthorized absence. The Army calls it AWOL, right? In the Army, it's AWOL. In the Marine Corps, it's UA, right? So so now you come back, and the people who have to, decide if you're punished or not are the people who are the perpetrators.
Right.
That blew my mind. I didn't, obviously when you said it, it made sense, but it's something I hadn't thought of in that regard. Because in my view, my chain of command, well, they're your saviors, right?
Right.
Well, not when they're the perpetrators.
No, it got worse. Every time I reported, I went through more severe punishment, more severe harassment every single time I came forward. And it was just, it was a domino effect of like, every time I tried to do these actions I learned in boot camp to address the situation of the hazing, of the sexual violence, and how to address these issues, I got more and more consequences, and they kept compounding. So at one point, I got to a point where, like, after I went through the hazing, after I went through sexual violence, after I went through getting physically assaulted, I got to a point where, like, I went UA, came back because I was like, I don't want to get out the Marine Corps. I just don't want to be at this base, right? And then I get locked in a room again for another 15 hours. The whole chain of command is coming in, and they're like, this is the Marine Corps. We're the hardest branch. This is what you signed up for. And you're going into a male-dominated field because CBURN or NBC was always attached to a grunt unit, right? It's like weapons of mass destruction. So at that time that I was in, women were not allowed in combat.
Right.
And there were pilot programs to integrate women into grunt units. So I was training when I was in Fort Leonard Wood. They actually had the way that NBC program was working to learn how to go into combat. I was training with the Army's SRT team.
Yes.
Their special resources.
Yep.
And because I was learning what it's like to, clear a building with, the flash bombs and weapons of mass destruction. And my job was, how do I clear the area? Who has to come up with what weapons to clear the area? So I was getting attached to all of these male-dominated fields that had no women in them at the time. And my training was like that. So it for me, I was basically being told, well, this is what you signed up for.
So hold on. I want to get into your head here for a second.
Okay.
And again, what bothered me again, if you were who you were today, right, you would have been able to somehow handle that far better because you've been through it and you get it. But you're 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
You don't want to go back home to mom and dad.
Right.
This is kind of all you got. You must have felt totally trapped.
Oh, yeah, 1,000%. That's why I started having suicidal ideation. I was like,
that's where I was going. Okay.
Yeah. If this is life, if this is the best life gets, I don't want to live anymore. And I spiraled downwards. Like, I got into drugs. I got into the sex trade. Like, when I spiraled down, that it was like a tornado spiraling down.
Were you active duty at this time or after you got out?
Actually, when I went UA, I went stripping because they froze my bank accounts. So that is actually how I got introduced to the sex trade.
Got it.
And that's another thing too. Like, I was a straight A student. I skipped 11th grade. I was on honor roll. I did excellent on the ASVAB. So for me, I was like, how was I a child that was on such a good path despite whatever adversity I've been through? And this is where I ended up. And I couldn't understand it because I didn't understand the social dynamics that played into that. And when you're 17, 18, I don't know that. I don't know how to communicate boundaries. I don't know who is safe and who is not, because what I thought I was supposed to do is not working out that way. So like, I felt like I had no answers. And every time I thought I was taking a right action to address something, there would be a consequence and something bad would happen. So I got to a point that I was like, this life is not worth living. All the stuff I ever learned about this life is not real. and I don't want to live anymore because this is not worth it. And I got to a point that I intentionally overdosed.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get saved?
So what was really sad is I called my dad, told him I don't want to live anymore. And my dad came to New York and I overdosed that day. And I just remember my dad like crying, being like, I'm fighting for you. I love you. I've raised you. I know you're going through a hard time, because I called him when I got raped and he came and he was there when that happened. He hired me an attorney because the Marine Corps attorneys were not doing anything.
Sure.
So my dad was like with me that whole time. And then like he knew that I was struggling then with drugs and stuff. And he really like worked to pick me up. Sure. I have a really strong father. Like it's incredible the strength that he has behind him. And
I knew you had to have a support structure to recover. I mean, otherwise people don't recover, right? My mother was an addict and she had me to help her to recover, right? That's how she was clean for the rest of her life, right? Because when I got her out of prison, I was there to, as your dad did, right? To help her up, to kind of be there so that when you have a support structure, you have a chance that not everyone even survives a support structure, but at least if you have a support structure, now you got a chance, right? Now maybe you can get through this and then hopefully help others, right? That's the hope if you can do that. So, so let me go back if I could. You go to schools, you go to training. This is after you went UA. You came back. Did they NJP you to give you Article 15 or no?
Yeah, they give me an NJP.
Okay, so you get NJP.
I got a lot of NJPs. I got like one for insubordination because one of the male sergeants was trying to spit on me, and I was like, "Yeah, bye," and I walked away. and he was telling the platoon to spit on me, and I was like, so I got like an NJP for insubordination. I got an NJP for going UA, and like this all happened as a result of me reporting that I went through this.
Right.
So it was like, and that was the other thing that mind blew me was like, okay, so now you're spitting on me and calling me a hoe because I told you that this photo of me got released that I did not consent to. And now you're telling people to spit on me. And I'm telling you, I'm not about that life. Like I grew up in New York. This doesn't fly with me. So, and I'm Puerto Rican. So like my attitude and my fight instincts coming out naturally. And then I'm getting written up for insubordination. Then I'm going through hazing. So like I got to a point that I had like maybe 3 NJPs.
Sure.
At that point, yeah.
So now you're training with the Army. When do you go to your first? When do you go out to the fleet?
So I went when I came back from going UA. I was in Quantico, and then they were doing on-the-job training and moved me into the fleet because what I ended up finding out when I got there was that base had a history of hazing and sexual violence.
Got it.
And what I learned was that if you went UA for more than 2 weeks, but less than 28 days, they normally don't send you back to the MOS school, and they'll do on-the-job training. So I got moved into that, which I didn't know until I was told I was going into on-the-job training in Quantico. So at that point, I also had enough of MOS school done that they moved me into a rehab platoon to go into on-the-job training.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and it was when I was in the on-the-job training is when I went through getting raped in the military.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. So it went from terrible to horrible to worse.
Yeah, that's why I got the suicidal ideation, because I was like, it just blew my mind that I could go to my leader, right, and say, hey, I'm in trouble. I've been victimized. I'm already going through humiliation. There's already a consequence, right? So like you and I are in a relationship. I send you a photo. You send it out to everyone, or someone steals it and sends it out, right? And all of a sudden, that's already humiliating, right? The situation itself provided me with a consequence for the situation. At this point, I'm looking for someone to help me set a standard and help fix the situation and protect me because I feel violated. And I'm 17 years old and I don't know what the hell to do. So
this then happens. When did you get out? And how did you get out? Did you just do your 4 years to get out? Did they throw you out? Did you bail? Did you get NJP'd out? How'd you get out?
Right. So when I got raped, I reported getting raped. They brought NCIS in, they did a rape kit, I got sent to the hospital, and when I came back, I had alcohol in my system, but someone put sleeping pills in the alcohol. So I was drugged and I was passed out. And when I got back to base, they arrested me for underage drinking and like drug usage. And when that happened,
they said, you got raped. That wasn't bad enough. We're going to arrest you too.
Right. Right. And that's what I was trying to say, was that every time you look for help, you end up getting consequences and retaliation for coming forward. So what happens is the trauma compounds.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And, you know, when that happens, you're just at a point like where you can't take it. It's too much pain because the situation caused pain. There's already trauma. And now your leadership is adding more trauma to you.
So now you're actually not only have you been hurt, but you've also been betrayed.
Right. That's exactly. And you feel like these people in leadership positions with all these beautiful chevrons who are wearing this powerful uniform have these ethics that they don't have. And it's so, it's life shattering to think of that. Like to see these, you know, Marines in these beautiful uniforms and what the military stands for, honor, courage, and commitment. And then you're in the situation and you're like, where's the honor? Where's the courage? Where's the commitment? Like, I'm not getting any of these values that you're saying that you live out to.
So you get out. Do you head back to New York right away? Is that where you go?
Actually, I went to Puerto Rico for like 3 months.
Puerto Rico. Okay. Was your family there?
Yeah, my dad's side of my family was all there. And like, my dad knew like I was not about to survive. So I think just because I gone through everything, he wanted me out of the States, but with family. Okay. And that was when, you know, I stayed over there for 3 months, and I stayed with both of my grandmothers on my mom's side and on my dad's side. I stayed there for 3 months, basically changed my phone number, didn't talk to anyone, you know, deactivated my Facebook. And
so you were kind of trying to reset.
Yeah. And also too, the Marine Corps, like in order to charge the guy that raped me, they also wanted me to testify, and I didn't want to testify. So they were trying to subpoena me. And I kept also telling my dad that I didn't want to go back and testify because I was blacked out drunk. I didn't know what happened. Somebody drugged me. I can't even, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And also I felt like after they threw me in jail, after the hazing, after everything else, like, why would I come and testify? And I was terrified. So like, I was just trying to like get away.
Sure.
So I talked to my dad, and my dad's like, we're going to send you to Puerto Rico and you're going to stay there.
So when did you head back to New York, and why?
So, well, obviously I had to like restart my life, and we were talking about, you know, trying to go to community college at that point, but I had gone through so much trauma, I could not function. So when I got back to New York, I was like, I have this unhealthy home. I don't want to go back to that home. I was trying to go to school, you know, it cost me money to go to school. I needed gas to get there. And then when I was at school, I was going through PTSD, and I had no idea I had PTSD because I didn't even know that you could get PTSD from sexual violence. So when I had gone through that experience, it was like I couldn't function at school. So it's like I ended up dropping out. I started working in finance, but they only had a part-time position, and it wasn't enough money to survive. And I went to go apply for benefits, and then I was told that I didn't have any benefits. And I found out that I got a retaliatory discharge, and I had discharge paperwork that says I have an honorable discharge, but they filed another form that says that I had an other than honorable.
Wow.
And when I tried to get it fixed and I told them it was a mistake, then they told me that I had fake paperwork, and that my paperwork wasn't real, and it was the paperwork I got that I signed when I left.
Wow.
And then I was told I didn't qualify.
So you got out and you couldn't even get VA benefits?
Not at all.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So all right. So now you're in trouble. But you told me something. You said that the VA was good to you. And that also surprised me, because generally speaking, I hear stories about the VA. Most of the time it's not good. But you actually said that it did come through. How were you able to get to the VA? And then how were they able to be good? Tell me, please.
Okay, so just to kind of set the standard, the VA I go to is a flagship VA, so it's one of the best in the country.
There we go. Okay.
That has to do with it because there's different ratings for the VA. And I know my VA ranks somewhere in the top 10 in the country.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the first thing with the program availability and everything they do. The second thing is how I got in. I wrote a letter. I actually went to the VA, I drove there, and I was like, hey, I'm going through suicidal ideation. I don't have benefits. I can't get benefits. Who can I talk to who can help me? And I ended up, they brought me into a room to talk to someone because they wanted me to go into mental health, and I was like, no, because I was scared.
Sure.
That if I told them what happens, like it was gonna get worse for me.
Mm-hmm.
So then finally, I was like breaking down. This woman was like, look, this person works in the benefits department. I'm gonna talk to them. Write this person a letter explaining what happened, so you don't have to meet with them. And I was like, okay. I wrote them a letter. What happens? And I was like, I need help. I don't know what's going on. Here's my symptoms, and I need to talk to someone. And when I did that, I got a letter back that's like, you're going to be enrolled as a healthcare enrollee. You can go to mental health and get your benefits, and we're going to accept you.
Nice.
And, someone, just helped me out, to be honest.
Good. So good. I'm so glad to hear that.
And that was how I got into the VA. And then what happened was I went to mental health, and I still would not tell them that I went through MST because I was scared that if they found out, they would pull my benefits.
Yep.
If they found out that I had a retaliatory discharge, and I didn't even think they knew what that was at the time. So I was like, oh, if they find out that I have an other than honorable, I'll lose my mental health benefits.
You were worried about that. Yeah, you needed it.
Right. So I never told them, but the problem that kept happening was I kept relapsing. Like I kept going. I would go to therapy, but I would relapse, and I would have this.
Tell me what a relapse. Look, my image of a relapse is feelings of you did something wrong, you're not worthy, self-destructive behavior, self-destructive thoughts. Am I right with that or no?
Like 90%.
Yeah, so that's what I'm feeling.
All of that happens, but also like my brain, so my serotonin levels in my body are lower than what they should be. So like what will happen is I'll have a memory, and the negative memory, the negative emotion will be so profound that like my brain gets pulled back into the scenario again.
Got it.
So when I have certain feelings like that of like worthlessness or like self-blaming or self-shaming, I'll be like, if a situation triggers that emotion, I'll like get brought back there. And then all of a sudden I'm like stuck going through that hazing again, or going through that rape, or getting put in jail, or every suffering I've had starts to come back as a vivid memory. And then I struggle between reality and that memory. And sometimes I can't decipher between the two because the flashback is so profound. So I like now being older, it's easier to manage. I take medication for it. So it's a lot different. But back then,
I also see that you are very much about female empowerment now. It's almost like you've turned your life almost the reverse.
Yeah,
like you've said, you know what? No, I'm not going to accept that I should, be the small, wallflower you want me to be. I'm going to be the big, bad, strong woman who does what she wants, how she wants, whatever she wants. I feel like you've almost, in a very, it's going to sound horrible, but in a terrible way, I think you've become stronger in a way from this than you were when you were 7. I think it's really a horrible way of doing it. I'm not saying anyone should go through it, but I'm saying, but there are so many people who go down a bad rabbit hole like you went down and never come out. And I'm sure you've met many of them.
Oh, yeah.
But I think you came out, and I think you came out stronger.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two sides to that, right? Well, there's multifaceted, but to simplify it, yes, because I went into finance, I developed a lot of financial skills and people skills and knowledge about the markets and the world that helps me to develop an organization. I developed leadership skills after the fact, right? But that was in the private sector. I did not get any of that leadership development skills. And like even the warmer environment of just developing and healing, a lot of the private sector did that for me.
Okay.
So, which is interesting because a lot of times people look at the private sector as just like purely bad. Like a lot of Democrats think that the private sector is really bad. And for me, the socialist aspect of the military was worse in leadership than the private sector is. And a lot of that has to do with how they get their money, right?
You just made a whole lot of libertarians feel real woman fuzzy with that one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's from experience on both sides. Like that's something that helped me in my development to develop the leadership skills. Because if I did not have those 12 years in finance, I would not be where I am because it was a huge development process. And the way corporate America is, it taught me so much. And when I had the self-doubt or when I didn't know what to do, I had this warm place to go to and this leadership development that really cultivated that in me. So I got really, really lucky ending up in finance and working for really great companies. And when that happened, that's when the shift in me happened. Because it was like I start going to the VA, I start going through treatment, and then I'm in this warm, safe environment that is teaching me that I'm a good person who's trying the best that I can. And being in that kind of environment every day, combined with my therapy and healing, it helped me to get on the right track where I started to grow. And I think from there is really where I developed into someone who could lead and then heal enough to fight back. But I think it's just the fact that I had a really unique journey that I'm very grateful for.
So let's walk down that journey. At one point, you decide you're going to run for office.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to run for office because when I got involved in finance, I was sitting on the JP Morgan ambassadorship program, which means like you work in finance, but you're doing a lot of civic engagement and you're working with the community and you're representing the company.
I love the community and company piece. I love it.
Yeah. And honestly, that's what attracted me to politics. And ever since I was younger, I was a history buff. I loved it. So I loved volunteering for that. And I liked working with these higher level executives and like learning their philosophies about the community relationship and partnership between the private sector and the community. When I got involved in that, I was like, I want to run for office because I want to eventually get to a point that I pass laws that protect veterans and service members from what I went through. But I don't ever want to tell my story. Like I didn't want to be working for JP Morgan or Citigroup or Bank of America, like these major names, and tell people I went through a horrific scenario in the Marine Corps that you value so much and you hold to this high standard. And I went through this horrific life. Like I didn't want to do that. Sure. So I was like, I'll learn how corporate America operates, how the private sector operates within the community. I'll run for office, take my leadership skills, and then behind the scenes, I'll put some bills and some laws through that help protect survivors that have gone through what I've gone through. That was my game plan, and I plan to never tell anyone what I went through. That didn't work out
so well.
No, because someone went through my medical files. It got published in the paper that I had an other than honorable discharge and that I got raped. And then when all that got published, I had a lot of explaining to do.
Of course. So when you ran, what did you run for the first time?
I ran for town council.
Okay. Why'd you pick that?
Yeah. Because when I ran for town council, I figured it would be a good stepping stone and good responsibility to get started.
But what you told me, though, at least I remember, there was a lot of people were against you, even within. You ran as a Democrat, correct? Or was it nonpartisan?
I ran as a Democrat. But that happens. That's my whole political career.
It's fine. No, look, I have tons of Democrats on this show. Democrats, Republicans. I don't mind. It's all good.
So like, here's the thing. I'm when it comes to like my political philosophies and how I am in politics, I don't follow traditional standards at all. And like, I've always been like that. Like when I got involved in politics, I live in a predominantly white area. And what happened with me with the Democratic Party was that they wanted me to support this Republican who was a Trump supporter who believed in certain philosophies that harmed minorities. And for me, I don't care that you're Republican, but if your values harm a minority populations, I cannot align with that.
So you're saying you were a Democrat, but the Democrats wanted you to support a Republican,
right,
who affected minority populations.
Right. And they're supposed to be the party that represents minorities.
There's New York politics for you.
100%, right. 100%.
So yes, I love it. It's New York politics for you. So you ran as Democrat, and the Democratic Party wasn't very good to you, were they?
No, because now when I stood up and I said something about it, I said I wouldn't support him. And I told them too, I was like, if you want to support him, the party wants to support him, that's fine. I'm going to run my own race, but I'm not doing anything to support this guy's race because I morally do not feel good going to your door and you're a minority and I'm a minority and I'm selling out behind the scenes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like that didn't morally align with me.
But there were some people who were kind of on your side who got behind you though, right? Some did?
Oh yeah. I mean, the way everything's ever worked for me is that people who they put ethics before politics have always supported me. So like party people or people that are very linear in their thinking where they're like full Democrat, whatever Democrats want, full Republican, whatever Republicans want, and they abide by that. And they stick to conventional, traditional standards. That audience will never align with me, but people that just align with their ethics and don't really care about the politics. So it's a lot of community people.
Sure.
And people that are new to politics or they're turned off by electoral politics and they're turned off by conventional thinking.
Okay. Well, I want to go there because my worry about what happened to you is similar to a lot of other bad things that happen in the world. And I'm going to say something that may sound odd. I'm not actually concerned that much about the justice for the people who did bad things to you. I think, believe it or not, you're past that already.
Oh, yeah.
What I'm concerned is, how do we change a system that would allow that to happen, right? That's always my issue. My issue is, how do I change an environment? And the funny thing is, I'm going to go back to something else. This is showing my age. In the 80s, the earlier 80s, I was on a board to become a meritorious Lance Corporal, a meritorious corporal. I forgot what it was. And one of the questions they asked me was, do I support, at the time they called them WMs, Women Marines? Do I? And I was like, no, not really. And they were like, why? That's not the PC thing to say. And I said, because we aren't ready for it. And boy, they hated that, and I lost the board. But what I found was, every once in a while, when I would see a female Marine come into the environment, all the males would change. I couldn't get any work done. They're all trying to hang out with the female Marine. I'm like, we got stuff to do, guys. There's stuff to do. Stop hanging out with her. Let's get the job done. And because some of them were so young, this was the problem with the actual female Marines. Some of them were so young, they weren't mature enough to understand how to handle all that male attention. They hadn't had it before. They had no idea. Some of them just loved it. And oh my God, I must be beautiful all of a sudden.
I lived that story. Like,
there we go.
That was my whole life. And I did not know how to make choices. I didn't know how to defend myself. And then whenever I thought I was reporting something, or I would get support, or I would get the help, it would backfire. So like, I was doing the best I could with what I had at that age, but I also had no support and no guidance and no one to help me out, which I also think is what compounded the sexual violence.
Absolutely. Yes. So I guess I brought that because I want to change the system, right? And I thought back then, I was probably 19 years old, and I saw it then. I was like, this is not good, right? I mean, this is not going to work. And again, I wasn't against, it's going to sound crazy, but this is also 30 years ago, more than that. Then I was thinking, we aren't ready for women. Like, the Marine Corps is not ready. It isn't that women can't do the job. That wasn't my concern. My concern is we're putting them into a meat grinder.
Right.
I mean, we're just not ready for them. We, in our own heads, we're not ready. And I guess I was right. But that was my biggest concern. So how do we make that? If you're looking back now you've got hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. You can look back at it now. Is there something you think we could have done or can do to change that environment to make that better?
Yeah, I think you have to have a separate regulatory body that is not ran by the military. So like in finance, they actually have a non-for-profit on Wall Street that helps balance Wall Street, the private sector. Mm-hmm. Instead of having the government oversee everything and have more power, they have people that work in the non-for-profit that have finance experience, have legal experience, and they help support the structure. I think with the military, you need some private sector training because the private sector has a lot. When you look at leadership in the military versus the private sector in terms of how to treat employees, the private sector is 100% a win on that. So I think you need some private sector regulation that can help balance out some of these issues. So I think having a non-for-profit regulates sexual violence in the military, and you have very strong business people, you have very strong attorneys and some leaders who understand MST, and you separate the power. Because I think what happens is the government has too much power. So like you have Congress that regulates the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense gets unlimited funding to do whatever they want. And when things like sexual violence happen, you can't sue, right? Because of the Ferris Doctrine.
Yes.
Because apparently rape is a part of what you signed up for, right?
I guess so.
So you can't sue. Where in the private sector, if that happened,
Yep.
your employer's getting a lawsuit. So they're ensuring sexual violence is not happening. Where in the military, they're basically, it's insular. There's no consequences that someone is ever going to face if the chain of command does not bring charges. There's no loss in income. There's no loss in leadership role. There's no nothing because there's too much power in the government consolidated. So I think you got to remove that power, and you need to put in a corporation that can regulate it and balance it, and then they can issue consequences and fines, just like what happens in finance. So it's weird because some of that's libertarian in the fact that like you want to remove some power from the government. But instead of like doing a checks and balances, it's like you're using the private sector to checkmate them.
Yeah, well, and not just that, you could also use the private sector to actually train them on leadership, right?
Yeah.
I think if you look, I mean, it's what I do for a living, by the way. I train leadership. It's what I do for a living.
Well, I think the private sector has to do that because,
because I remember as a Marine, the way I thought, my leadership was very weird. When I got out of the Marine Corps, my first job was running a small English school. And I remember how hard that was for me. Not because I couldn't lead or do the job. I could do the job. I had a degree. I could do it. The problem was I couldn't handle the actual teachers because they weren't Marines. Again, like you, I joined at 17. I didn't know what another job was. All I knew was Marines.
Right.
That's all I knew. So I remember this true story. One of the teachers calls up and he calls and he goes, "Hey, you know, Larry, I want to let you know I'm not feeling good today." So I think, oh, he's letting me know he's going to come in late or he's not going to be up to speed. No, he was calling in sick. And I was like, oh, you do that? Like, I didn't know you get to call in sick. I never called in sick as a Marine, right? You were either in formation or you were in the morgue or the hospital or jail. That's it. Those are the 4 places to be. Yeah. That was it. There's no, I'm sick. That didn't exist. Right. So, I mean, I had to make a big change. So I really wish, as I look back, and this is many years ago, I wish I had some form of civilian training to be a better leader or to understand how things work in a civilian world. I didn't get that.
You know, what I also think about, though, is like combat readiness and being ready to go to war is you need to have that. And like, that's definitely an important part of the military. But your everyday life in the military does not need to feel like you're in combat and can't trust people, right? Like you can have an organization where you don't have workplace violence internally when you're not in combat.
Right.
So like to have the levels of workplace violence, have the levels of sexual violence that happen in the military, it's astounding. And that majority of that happens here in America. So it's like, how do we not see that as a huge leadership issue? And you're right, the military cannot resolve its own problem.
Yes.
And the leadership is so different when it comes, because these people at the top, all they know is war, right? All they know is force. All they know is retaliation. So you need people who come in and they're like, well, what's the best for the employee?
Right.
What is the best outcome that's healthy for the organization? How do we be more profitable, right? Because the way an organizational leader thinks in the private sector is going to be based on the bottom line of what's profitable. Sure. Do we spend money retaliating on someone when it's probably going to cost us more money? Or do we sit there and we say, how do we rehab this person and get them to be productive again? Right.
Absolutely.
And I feel like those are conversations that senior leaders in the military need to have with senior executives in business to start spending money better, to start spending resources better, and to also not waste, money harming your own people and creating social problems. Because now you have 1.5 million veterans who have PTSD due to MST who are getting lifetime pensions.
1.5 million?
Yeah, there's 1.5 million veterans who receive VA benefits for PTSD due to MST.
I am blown away by that number.
Yeah, and a lot of times
there be 1.5 million, and so this is why your organization's exploding, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 100%.
This is the reason.
What it is. Because,
oh my God, that's a number I would have never guessed.
Well, the other thing that's really insane about it is that PTSD, due to MST, a lot of the benefits payments that are getting paid out are generally between 50 and 100% disability. So you're talking about, and there's more pension payments right now for PTSD going to MST than there is combat. And to me, it's like, that's money.
I don't want to believe that. Wow. That's a self-inflicted wound.
Right. And that's money that could be more efficiently spent.
Many, many more places.
Right.
Absolutely.
And when every time you talk to someone, the issues that related to their PTSD, the trauma impacted it, but the severity of it came from retaliation.
Right. Right.
So it's like, if you just dealt with the trauma and the situation that happened and helped the service member rehabilitate while they were in service, and you didn't retaliate, and you supported their growth and development and helped them heal and help prevent sexual violence to begin with and stopped the workplace violence, none of that money would be getting spent on that. Right. You would have more people who, instead of looking for young people all the time, you can grow your organization, promote people, and have healthy careers.
Sure. So no, I get it.
So, and then you're also harming communities when people come out.
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, right, this is a self-inflicted wound.
Yeah.
And it's the worst type, because when this happens, first off, very often, particularly if you're young, you blame yourself. You think, what could I have done? What did I do wrong? Why did this person of authority in my life punish me? Clearly, I've done something wrong. I'm a bad kid. I'm a bad person. That's one. So you have regret. Then when you go to the people who are supposed to help you, they turn on you. Now you have betrayal. Those are the two worst emotions anyone can feel, is regret and betrayal.
At the same time.
Just double them at the same time.
Yeah. That's why if you look at, if a veteran has a history of military sexual trauma, they're 70% more likely to commit suicide than a veteran who doesn't have a history of MST. And you nailed it on the head. When you're dealing with both of those negative emotions that are so profound, your brain chemistry, your hormones, everything ends up getting messed up, because your body ends up dealing with those emotions for the long term. And all of a sudden you get stuck in those emotions.
Right.
And it leads to your symptoms of PTSD. And when you're young, when you're under 25 and your brain is not developed, it becomes permanent damage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask, what in the world does MST do? Right? What is it? How is that assisting, helping? What is it doing?
So we passed the laws in New York. We lobbied successfully and passed the Restoration of Honor Act. And that has helped with survivors who come back and veterans. If they were retaliated against in the state of New York, you now get benefits and can upgrade your discharge. So you can get housing, vocational, school, everything you need. You can get access to your benefits. If you've been discriminated against, if you were discharged due to medical purposes, you can get that as well. So all of those are ways that we're assisting. We're also lobbying for the MST Victims Bill of Rights, which includes what I told you about having a non-for-profit in the private sector essentially regulate sexual violence, and be able to assist with these like leadership deficits in the military. So we're lobbying for that on the federal level. And on a day-to-day basis, we run awareness campaigns. And we also put out survivor stories where the community can engage, because like my story has a lot of hardship, but there's other people who have other stories as well, and other issues. Like we have some people that are transgender in our community that were transitioning or trying to transitioning when they went through MST. You know, we have male survivors. So we have the Perspectives newsletter, and we have our Perspectives podcast, where we talk about these different circumstances and the different storylines of what leads to MST. And it's misogyny. It's this idea that a certain category of masculine men are superior, and you have to fall into that unhealthy mindset that doesn't serve anyone and does not serve diversity purposes. And when you don't fall in line, you deserve to be a target for sexual violence and hazing. So we challenge those social norms on a regular basis, and we run very provocative campaigns to gain attention, to create awareness.
Got it. So almost like an activism group.
Yeah, that's a movement, right? Like,
sure, I love it.
Activities, yeah,
absolutely. So you brought up a valid point. I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, as I told you, I did the ground side, and then I did the air side. And when I was in the air wing, I wasn't the hardest core sergeant on the ground side. I was a good, solid sergeant. When I went to the air wing, I was like super sergeant. because of what you said, that the masculinity that I had from the ground side, right? We were infantry, artillery, tanks. We were the ground side, right? So then when we moved over to the air wing, which is much more behind the lines, much, that kind of, I ran an armory. I mean, that's what I did, right? I was in intelligence. I wasn't, I carried a rifle. I wasn't going to shoot it anymore, right? So, I mean, that kind of changed on what I was doing. And that masculinity seemed to not be as valuable in that environment, but it was super valuable, as I felt it was when I was on the ground side. Is there an argument, and this is an open question, is there an argument for there being value in the heavy masculinity in certain MOSs, or no?
Well, okay, so I want to tell you, for me personally, going through what I went through in the Marines and being so young, my brain is wired like that. Like, I actually have a lot more masculine tendencies being a female than I do feminine energy. So, like, one of my main key issues is, like, my fight response is so strong. And that's what you want in somebody who's going to fight, right? Like,
sure.
And that's why I ended up leading a movement. But, like, you want somebody to go to combat that has a strong fight instinct.
Sure.
So it can serve a purpose. But I also think that you can teach that skill set and develop that in someone without creating a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, I think you can develop skills where people can learn to control that versus someone's brain chemicals get personally damaged and now they have to take medication to restore the brain chemicals to now balance out those energies. So like when I worked in finance, I got licensed, I developed the skills on how to run the markets, how to do investments, how to trade, how the insurance markets work. And like, no one had to traumatize me to do that. So I think you can develop fight instincts and you can develop a fighter through skills without being like, let me mess your brain up.
Right.
Go through this hardcore culture that is toxic. And you can build a healthy culture. And when people go to combat and they're getting ready for combat, you can have combat simulations. The military does it all the time. I just don't think you need to create a culture that can make somebody feel like while they're at home in the United States that they're in combat their whole time and they have to fear for their lives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what's the future for you? Is the future, you told me that you recently resigned out of the finance industry.
Yeah, so I've been running the movement. I mean, there's a lot going on with it. Like, there's so much is happening, right? Like on every side, whether, it's interviews that are going on, whether it's like legal stuff that we're doing, marketing programs that are coming out, stories that are coming out, fundraising. Like, there's always something going on.
Or super cool podcasts like this.
Yep. It's total. Yes. It's always something, right? Like every day. And I enjoy it because I see how many survivors are coming forward to speak their voice and be able to make a difference. So it's heartwarming and it's purposeful. And I never thought I'd be doing this, but I will definitely tell you, way harder than finance. Way harder.
Yes, absolutely. So, but I guess where I'm going with this is, now that you've kind of walked away from the finance side and you're here now, is your future back and running for office again, or is the future more staying in this, or some combination?
I would like, if I had a perfect world, I would love to have both, to be involved in the movement and electoral politics. I don't know if that would be a possibility. The other side is, what I like about movement and politics is I can work with Republicans, I can work with Libertarians, I can work with Democrats, I can work with anyone in movement and politics. In electoral politics, there's so many restrictions on what you can and can't do. So, and also me being someone who's as innovative as I am for politics and someone who's non-traditional in political approaches and awareness, that doesn't always work with party lines, because party lines relate to their demographic based on a zip code, right? Like that's how everybody works. So it's like, if it's predominantly white and moderate, then you have to become that candidate and fit in that category. Where in movement politics, I can be authentic and be who I am, and people will work with me just being authentic.
Got it.
And for me, I feel like to help survivors be able to come forward, veterans, we have all different political ideologies and we have veterans from all different backgrounds. So I feel like I need to be authentic in order to help other people come out and be authentic. And I feel like if I have to put on a facade the way that happens in electoral politics, it would harm survivors. Okay. So if I got to a point that I could maintain like the authenticity that's required to help other people come forward and run for office being fully authentic.
Sure.
And I have that kind of support versus, getting shunned on for being that way,
yes.
Then I would run for office again in the future.
Yeah, no, a lot of people in Democrat Republican circles are going to be unhappy with you. They're going to be unhappy with you because you aren't what you're supposed to be as a politician. You have a checkered past, which they're going to blame you for because that's what they always do. Right. They're going to say you're anti-military. They're going to say all those things and be mad at you. But it's going to be clear, Libertarian Party doesn't judge you. Just putting a plug in. We're not judging.
I told you, like, I would be, if New York had open primaries, I would be a total independent. Like, I don't vote straight, and I don't ever support, like, one party. Like, I've never voted that way, and I don't vote that way. I always vote for, like, people. Like, if I'm voting for you, it's because I know your values, we align well. And because our values align well, like, I'm going to work with you, right? And I'm going to support you and I'm going to vote you in.
There we go. I'm getting in. She has said it. I'm now going to win. Thank you. Done deal. I love it. I love that. So I guess the last piece I want to bring up here is, you're doing this now. What do you see as your biggest goal right now for the movement? What's the short term? Like, I shouldn't say short term, near term, not short, near term goal.
There's a lot. The main
Just give me one big one.
The main big one would be getting the MST Victims Bill of Rights enacted into law.
Got it. Okay.
That's the main goal and the main mission, is because that would forever impact survivors.
Got it. Well, the thing that still blows my mind is the 1.5 million people who are, one, suffering, which is a human toll, and two, getting paid, which is a financial toll, and then three, probably having very difficult family, relationships, right? Which is a family social toll, right? Right. The odds are, if your PTSD is so difficult for you that you're 50 to 100% disabled, that means you're really traumatized, and that is going to make your relationships tougher. Doesn't mean you can't have them, but this. You're going through it, right? It makes it harder because now whatever romantic partner you have has to deal with that extra thing, and relationships are hard enough. And now that's another thing to deal with. And even family and friends, right, who can't understand what you've been through. Even that communication is now more difficult. Yeah. So we're making everything tougher.
Well, it definitely impacts, like, what you're talking about with relationships. I was in a really bad abusive marriage and I miscarried. And then at that point, I had to stop dating altogether because I had a bad habit of attracting violent men. Mm-hmm. And I ended up learning it was because of my brain chemistry and the way the patterns developed when I went through everything, that's what I thought was normal. Yep. And I was like, I can't date. I need to stay single and I need to focus on what's healthy. And I had to learn that through going through therapy. And then I had to go through bonding therapy. I had to go through, like, DBT. I had to go through cognitive processing therapy just to learn how to identify what's healthy and then how to be healthy.
Yes.
In a relationship. And
you're not there's 1.5 million people who have some level of that. Some worse than you, some not as bad as you, and some just like you. And that's my other, this is damage on three parts to our country. The individual damage, right? The financial damage, and then the social cultural damage. It's just damage everywhere. I definitely see it.
Why when I, talk about the movement and I try to talk openly and honestly, because I know that there's so many people who are not at a point that they can talk about it. Yep. Or, like, even for me, I didn't even have these conversations at length with my dad until I miscarried in 2018. And when I actually started opening up with my family about it, that's when my family all together started to heal. And then I realized what a big component me having PTSD is in my relationship with my sister, my dad, my mom, my grandmothers, like my cousins. And I started realizing how much damage was being done just because they didn't understand I had PTSD. I wasn't communicating it and no one knew what was going on. And then when everyone started getting educated and I started getting better and I started having that really strong support system, and it was like we all learned how to function with what was going on. And then it started to get better. And I think about what you're talking about. There's 1.5 million people. How big are their families? Because we might have 10.5 million people who are struggling right now dealing with this and don't know where to start, don't know what to do. And then everyone says, I support veterans. I support our service members, but why are we letting this happen? And why are we not doing anything to fix it? And why are we ignoring it?
Absolutely. I'm with you. And the worst part of all of it, it's a self-inflicted wound.
Right.
That's of everything's bad, but the worst part is we could just not do it.
Well, that's why I call it the underbelly of America and the underbelly of the military, because it's like we think of freedom, we think of courage, we think of honor, we think of being patriotic. And then when we see service members, we're like, yes, we're a part of that. And then we're like, why are 22 committing suicide every day? Why are billions of dollars going to veterans, but there's still these suicides? But then when you look at VA statistics, well, why are 70% from the MST community where $0 are going? And why aren't we implementing programs that work? And why aren't we shifting the balance of power to make this effective, right? Like when you think about it, you're like, money is going into all these things for veterans, but like the problem's totally ignored.
Yes,
and no
absolutely.
one's talking about it.
The results don't matter, right? Because this is a bigger problem that I have. And if you ever see, I talk about this constantly. We're just humans. No one's perfect.
Right.
The Marine Corps is an amazing organization, and it has terrible problems. Both. You can be both. You can be an amazing fighting force and still have a harassment problem. You can be both. I can be a good speaker and still have a weight problem, or still, be mad at my kids or something. I can still be that human being that can be two or three things in so organizations.
Right. Well, organizations are made up of personalities, right? So, and the people. I always think about that because I look at like, okay, I'm a leader, but I'm also disabled. Mm-hmm. And I look at like, I have my flaws and I have my disabilities. But I'm still trying my best, and I'm trying to grow and develop and learn from my mistakes. And I've made my leadership mistakes, and there's things that I regret and that I'm like, I need to work on to be better. And when I look at the military, I think we have an amazing military. Mm-hmm. Like hands down, we have the best military in the world, right? Like if there's one thing America is good at, it's having a fighting force.
Yep.
I also think that it is okay for us to end workplace violence in the military and to end MST and to protect our service members. Yes. So it's not that I hate the military, that I'm anti-military. I care about the people that are in our military, and I care about our veterans, and I want them to succeed and have better lives. And I want people to have an easier time and an easier life than I did.
Yep.
So to me, bringing out the underbelly is the way we're going to start cleaning up the mess and start taking the actions to raise our leadership standards as a nation to say enough is enough. And now let's begin healing our military and let's end the workplace violence that's happening internally, right? But yeah, it's organizations have personalities, leaders have personalities.
Yes.
I would not sit here and say the military is this bad, evil place, because I don't view the world as black and white.
Sure.
We're all human.
Absolutely.
We're all part of organizations. We're all trying our best, and sometimes we need help to get better and to develop, right? And I think the military needs some private sector help.
There we go. Good. All right. So before we wrap this up, everybody go down to the website at the bottom, www.mstmovement.org. Check it out. See what she's doing. See what she's got going on. And if there's some way you can help out and you want to help out, go ahead. By the way, fellow New Yorker, which makes her super cool. Absolutely. Anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me, and I really appreciated being able to have an open and honest conversation. Anytime that we can talk about politics and just be honest about dynamics, and because like I said, some politics and some parties don't like that. So I just want to say how much I appreciate that, and your leadership and being able to have these hard conversations that not everybody wants to have.
Absolutely.
And your willingness to hear other sides and other opinions about these problems and how to solve them. I think when we come together, no matter where we're from in our backgrounds, and we decide to work together, is really where we're going to have progress. So I just really wanted to thank you for that opportunity. And I really look forward to building a relationship with you, the Libertarian Party, and really just moving the conversation forward on military sexual trauma, and however, you know, we can support, you know, your party, your mission, and what you're trying to accomplish to make a difference. You know, that's what's important.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching, guys. I will see you all tomorrow.